I am honored to be here. I'm honored that you chose to take your Saturday morning to come and be here with us at Gratis. So just welcome and know that we love you as well for just being here. Um, so, Angie was saying that we chose the word epiphany, and it's on your mug that we want you to take home with you. Whether you drink coffee or your hot tea like me, you can sit, you can drink. It's got Gratis Church on there, but it's got the word epiphany. And why Epiphany? Maybe you know that that is the time right after Christmas, leading into January, up to January 6th. That's known as an Epiphany. And it's the time after Christ's birth into the new year. Maybe you know that it's a store, a really nice store in Athens, and then we have one in Monroe that I like to go to and look at their things. And they play Christian music, they have Christian platitudes on their things. It's just a really sweet store. But that's not why we chose it. We chose the word, like Angie said, it was in our book that we were going through in our 40 days of prayer and fasting. But I did some digging and I have a definition of epiphany that I want to share with you. And this has been what we've been praying over you ladies as we have prepared for this day, as we've talked about it. This has been bathed in prayer. And I want to share the word epiphany. It means a profound realization. It means a deeper understanding of truth, and God is truth. So that's really a revelation of God. And that's what we're praying for you today, that each of you leave today with a deeper understanding of who God is and who he can be for you and what he wants to do in your life. So that's how we came up with Epiphany. Now, in Romans, we're going to put some scriptures up here that I have. In Romans 1:20 it says, "For his, that's God, invisible attributes, namely his eternal power and his divine nature, have been clearly perceived ever since the creation of the world in the things that have been made, so that all are without excuse." Ladies, what that's saying is that God's been revealing himself to creation since the beginning of creation. He has been revealing himself, his attributes. And one way that he reveals himself is through his creation, through us. See, on the 6 days of creation and the seventh, he rested. He was creating everything that we see, everything that we get to enjoy. But on that last day, he saved the best for last. That's when he created us in his image. We are his image bearers. That we have the soul that can live with him eternally. That's why we're the best of his creation. And one way he reveals his character is through us, his creation. And that's what I want you to take away today is that your story, we all have a story. God is weaving it from the beginning, birth, till the end of life, death. And he's weaving the good, the bad, the ugly, the messy, the so-so parts, the pretty parts, the not so pretty parts, the hard parts. He's weaving all of that, and our stories then become a testimony of God's character. That's why we're here. It tells us in Ephesians. Now, if our stories are a testimony of God's character, I just want to share my story. But as I share my story, I don't want you to hear me. I don't want this to be about Lisa. I'm just a vessel to share the message that we believe that God wanted us to bring today, and I just get to be a part of it. But I want you to hear three things as I share my story. I want you to hear that faith can conquer fear. We don't have to give into fear, ladies. As women of God, we are to have faith. We're to have strong faith. And you're going to hear that throughout my story. Different people and their faith and the trust that they had in God. The second thing that I want you to hear is that pain has a purpose. And that's even just hard to say or hard to hear. But I want you to know this is a truth. These are truths. This is a truth that God does not waste a single hurt that you have felt or will feel in life. It's not wasted. There's a purpose in that. And the last thing is because it's all for His glory. And that was the song that the worship team led us in last. It is all for His glory. So, your story that is a testimony of God's character, it's for His glory. So, you listen for those things as I share my story. So, it starts with a couple that had been married for a couple of years. They so desired to have a child. That was the plan when they got married. They wanted to start a family, but they ran into trouble. They were not able to immediately get pregnant like others did and like they had hoped and thought that they would. So they wrestled with that for a while. There was grief, there was pain in that. There was, decisions to be made. And finally, because of their faith and their trust in the Lord, they decided to step out and pursue adoption. Now, pause that story. At the same time, there was a girl that was about 16 and a half years old, and she was a pastor's kid, and she found herself in a situation that she didn't plan on, but she was pregnant, not married, still in high school, wanting to finish high school. And she herself had faith. She had faith enough to not know how this was all going to play out. And she had questions and she had fear and pain in this. But she made a very selfless decision. And she decided that she was going to place this baby up for adoption. Now, in the early 70s, she wasn't allowed to still go to school. So there was even, some shame that she had to overcome in that amongst her friends and, the community that she lived in. But she knew because of her faith that she was doing the right thing. She had the support of her parents. She even had the support of her church, which to me is just a beautiful picture of the way the body of Christ should respond when someone does go through a difficult season. And they responded in a glorifying way to the Father. So, with the support, she actually moved to a Florence Crittenden home in Charleston, South Carolina. She finished out the last about 5 months of her pregnancy. She was able to continue school like correspondence classes. They gave her prenatal care that she needed. And finally, the time was there for the baby to be born. And she never wavered in her decision. She knew that this was what God was telling her to do. See, He was still weaving her story as a young girl, and she wanted the story of the baby to be one that was hopeful. She wanted a couple to be able to adopt this baby, a mother and a father that could care for this child better than she felt like she could as a teenager and the things she still wanted to finish up in school. And she didn't want her parents, they were a little older, they had already raised their children. And I think a lot was just what she had seen in the church. She had seen some people struggle with infertility, and she had watched how, families are made in many different ways. It's not just blood. And she truly believed this is what she should do. So the baby was born. It was me on February 15th, 1973. And even though I don't think they were supposed to, one of the nurses actually let her see the baby. She brought me wrapped up into that room. And as a young girl that just gave birth to a baby that she was going to then place truly in the Lord's hands and not know where this child was going to go. I can't imagine that as a mother that's now had two that I birthed and another one that was placed in my hands. I cannot imagine then giving the child up again. But she never wavered. That nurse brought the baby in And she told me that she unwrapped the blanket and she just prayed over me. She just spent time choosing not to give in to fear, choosing a good plan, God's plan for my life and hers. She prayed over, she said she started at my head and she prayed all the way, fingers all the way down to my toes, just praying over me before they took me. Then she had to go before a judge, and this I really cannot imagine. As a young girl standing before a judge, her parents weren't allowed in there with her, and the judge was somewhat harsh and really trying to press in. Are you sure you know what you're doing? But again, she did. She knew that this was the decision. She knew that even through this hard decision, God had a plan. He had a purpose. He had something beautiful that He was weaving. So I was placed in foster care. She went back home. She had high school to finish, friends to be with, life to live as a older teenager. And I was ready to be adopted. So, go back to this couple. They had been married 10 years by now. They had been waiting and they really wanted a baby and they really wanted a girl. Mother had grown up with sisters, daddy had a lot of sisters. She really was hoping that it would be a girl that they would be matched with when the adoption agency called. And finally, they got that call. They had to travel. It was in May. It was a rainy, dreary day. They were driving to the building that they were supposed to go to. They weren't really sure where they were going. They ended up getting in the parking lot and just getting in the closest door that they could see to go in for the building. Ended up they were in the basement of the building and they knew, okay, we got to get on the elevator and go where there's someone that can help us. So they're on the elevator and just before the doors close, a lady steps in the elevator carrying a baby. And mother said something just, it leaped in her heart. And it makes me think of the story with, Elizabeth and Mary. And just sometimes the Spirit, the Holy Spirit, He quickens our heart in some way. And she said that she tugged on her husband's arm, Daddy's, and she said, "That's our baby. I know it. I just know that's our baby." And he said, "You don't know that. We're at an adoption agency. You're going to think every baby is your baby, and you would probably take every one of them home. But you cannot do that. We have to wait and go through the proper channels." He's very reasonable, logic. She's like, "I don't care. That's my baby. I know it is." So it ends up they get upstairs, they go into a room, they have to fill out their paperwork. Sure enough, when they take them into a room with a couch, they tell them they're going to bring the baby in. And that was me. That was the very baby that they brought in and they placed in mother's arms. And she was so overjoyed. This was what she had been praying for so, 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 so long. And her prayers were answered in a way that were joyful and happy. Now, go back to this teenage girl. She lives her life. The judge had told her, "You're never going to see this kid again." Although, because of her strong faith, she thought, "You don't know. I serve a big God. God can do anything, right?" So she kept that in her heart and in her mind. She married. She began to have kids. And she thought about, maybe making herself available. So she actually put her name on a registry. Within the state of South Carolina, you could put your name in a registry, and if a child that you had placed for adoption would put their name on, then it would match in the registry and they could make a connection and maybe you could find, you know, this relative that you have. But nothing had happened for a long time. I was growing up, I was little. Mother and daddy were raising me. her name sat there for a while, and then her kids, hit those teenage years, middle school years. You've got high school coming and all the things they were involved in with sports. And she thought, this probably just isn't the right time to be making a connection or a reunification. So she took her name off. Now, I'm 18, and my parents had always raised me with a very healthy view of my story. We were very proud. I was proud. In fact, I remember it was probably about first grade. And so you can kind of forgive me because you can say maybe I didn't really know better. I probably did. First grade, and this boy was teasing me, and I was proud. I mean, I'd tell everybody I'm adopted. And some kids didn't know what that meant. And, I would share as much as I could because my parents would tell me my story at age appropriate times. They would share more about my story. So I was telling this boy I'm adopted, and he's like, huh? I'm like, well, there was one lady that had me in her tummy, and she was my birth mom, but she was not able to keep me. So then my mother and daddy adopted me. And he was like, that's weird. And I was like, no, it's not. You're just jealous. And he was like, but who's your real mom? And this it gets worse. He says, who's your real mom? And I'm like, the lady that you see pick me up, my mother. That is my real mom. And he's like, I don't think so. And I said, yes, it is because she chose me. Your mom had to keep you when she had you in the hospital. I got in trouble for that. Yeah, he told the teacher called my parents. My parents said, Lisa, you cannot say things. We want you to be proud of your adoption story. But look, God makes families in lots of ways, and those children are just as chosen and just as special because they have wanted their children as well. And I totally understand that now. But as a first grader, I did kind of think maybe I was a little more special. Um, no, but my parents, they would share as they shared the story. I remember a book that mother had that we would just read. It was just a part of our routine that, about how families are made in different ways and the specialness of a birth mom and maybe, what a birth mom does in a act of love and then how a family can gain a child into their home that maybe was not blood. So I just am so grateful for that. My parents were believers. My father has passed away a little over a year ago. My mother is still alive. So they were believers. They raised me in a Christian home. They gave me stability. They afforded me so many different things, whether it was the schooling I was able to go to or the activities, the sports, the arts, the trips that we were able to do, the vacations. So many things that I'm so thankful for. I was never unhappy, but if you work puzzles, I like puzzles, and you have your 1,000-piece puzzle and you've got it all laid out and you've spent your time and you've worked that puzzle and you can see the picture. You've used the box lid and you've got those pieces, but there's one piece. And you look under the table, you look back in the box, is it somewhere hidden in the carpet or the rug or where is that one piece? And you're curious for it. You know what the picture looks like. Well, that's kind of the way I felt. That's the way I explained it, to people that I'm so thankful for my parents, my mother and my daddy. But I did wonder about my beginning. I did wonder about birth mom and the rest of her story. How did it turn out? And I so wanted to share with her about mine, how my life had been, how I was so thankful for the decision that she had made. So I'm 18 and I began to do some research. It's in the age of television talk shows. So I'm dating myself. Um, Donahue, Sally Jesse Raphael, Oprah Winfrey, Maury Povich, all of the Geraldo, all of the shows were on. And I was like, oh, I'm going to write. I wrote to every talk show host I did. I had to find addresses. This was the internet was just kind of becoming a bigger thing. I found addresses. I wrote. I shared. I would love to be reunified. I want to search and find my birth mom. And some of them even did specific shows related to that. But I never got a phone call. So I got a little discouraged. My parents were very supportive. They told me as much as they could and helped me as much as they could. And I put it on hold. I went to college. I was excited about that and getting my degree and living the life of a college student. Then I met Spencer. We were dating and we were becoming more serious and talking about marriage, and I said, "Well, I think I need to share something with you." And he knew that I was adopted, but I said, "I really also feel that God wants me to adopt when I'm married. If I'm able to have children biologically, that's great. I certainly hope so, but even if we do, I feel like that's a calling on my life that I am to adopt as well." And he was like all for it. He said, "Absolutely. It's a picture of God's heart. That's what God does for each of us, ladies. So, most importantly, if you haven't made that decision in your life, that's the most important decision that you'll ever make is that you give your heart to Jesus Christ, that you accept him as your personal savior and give him lordship of your life because he adopts you into his family." So, Spencer was great with it. We did get engaged, we got married. So now I'm in my early 20s and we're talking about having our family, starting our family with children. And I begin to think, well, all my life in my records, when I go to the doctor's office, they say, "What's your family history?" I don't know it. I'm adopted, and I don't have any talents. I have to tell you people that. Can you just write it down in my file somewhere? Because I feel like I repeat this every time. I don't know. They'll say, "Well, do you know if you have a history of—" I don't know. So I start thinking, well, if we have a child, I don't know. I've never had a baby before. Like, what if something goes wrong or they need to know or, you know, they're curious about maybe something you passed to the child? So I kind of picked it back up, my search. Not the talk shows anymore. I got on the internet. The web, World Wide Web was up and going really well. And I found this registry and I put my name on. But remember, she's taken hers off. So I put my name on and it sits there and it sits there and it sits there for not quite 20 years, but almost. I'm in my late 30s. And one day, I'm at school. I'm a school teacher. I'm teaching, and a kid comes to me. Actually, we had gone to lunch, and we eat with our kids in small private school. You don't get that break. You just sit at the table and help them with stuff and make sure they're not throwing food. So I'm sitting at the table, and a high schooler comes in, and he says, "Miss Breedlove, there's a message from your husband, and he says call you." And I'm like, "Is it an emergency?" And he said, "No, ma'am, it's not an emergency." I said, "Okay, great, thanks. I'll talk to Spencer when I get home at 3:30." I don't have time for that. I've got 30 something third graders in the cafeteria. So we go back to the room after we finish up lunch and the phone is ringing. Usually I ignore it. So I did. And then it was like they hung up, after 5 rings and they call right back again. I'm like, okay, that's going to keep on. Let me just answer it. Hello. And it's Spencer. He says, "Lisa, are you sitting down?" I said, "Yeah." "No, I'm not sitting down." I lied. I said, "What do you want, Spencer?" "I'm teaching. I'm in the middle. I'm about to start my math lesson." And he said, "No, I really need you to sit down." And I'm like, "Spencer, just say it." He said, "Sit down and I'll tell you." I said, "Okay, fine." So I sit down and he said, "Lisa, this place in South Carolina, and before he finished anything else, I knew that's where the registry was. And I said, "They found my birth mom." And I started crying. And my sweet little third graders were like nudging each other. "Somebody should go get the principal. We've never seen Miss Breedlove cry before." I'm like, "It's okay. It's okay. It's happy tears," which they don't understand that either. So I said, just hold on, sit down, get color, something, do something. And I got the teacher aide to come in and I called Compass of Carolina back. And sure enough, they said, we received a match. Obviously, she had placed her name on while mine was already in there for 15 plus years, and they had made a match with our information, and they said, "What do you want to do?" And I thought, well, duh. I've been waiting forever, it feels like, for this. It's been a prayer of mine. But y'all, here's the thing, too. That was where faith came in and where I had to not give in to my pain of, is this going to ever happen? I had to trust that it was going to be the Lord's timing, that it was going to be the right time, that it was going to be His perfect time, not just what I wanted. And so they told me, they explained, they said, well, it's not going to happen that fast, ma'am. You have to go to counseling. She would have to go to counseling. Then there's like a waiting period. I'm like, what do you mean a waiting period? We've waited almost 40 years, like since she placed me on her dogs. I mean, I think that's long enough. And like, no, ma'am, it's state mandated. I said, okay, whatever. Okay, I'll go to counseling like tomorrow. And they're like, you might need to put the brakes on a little bit. I said, okay. So it ends up that she had gotten the same message, there's a match, and holidays were coming. This was October, Thanksgiving and Christmas were coming. She had kids in college that were going to be coming home, and she said, I just need the holidays with our family, and I need to figure out telling my children. So then I knew I had siblings, and this is still all through the caseworker. We haven't talked yet, but I'm picking up clues. I'm like, okay, so I have siblings, at least half siblings, okay, and all right, just all this emotion and thoughts are flooding, and they say, so let's circle back in January. And I thought, oh my goodness. But y'all, again, the Lord really used it to, I think, give me an epiphany, a deeper understanding of His abiding with me and His continuing to walk with me. He had walked with me these 37 years. He was still walking with me in these last few moments and leading up to, I didn't know what would happen. And I turned that into the next few months just a time of prayer, praying that He would go before her as she needed to sort her emotions out and maybe tell people and figure out what she was going to do. And then just prayer. And that just really calmed me where I did not worry. I was not anxious anymore. So January comes. And oh boy, as soon as it was the day that she said I could call, I was waiting for that caseworker. Sure enough, she called me. I had my phone with me. She called and she said, okay, y'all, you've both done your counseling and we've got to wait 30 days. So the clock is ticking now. And I'm like, okay, so that puts us like at the end of February. Oh my goodness, it was just like those days and hours just ticked by, but that's okay. Life was still going on and God was still teaching me lessons. So at the end of February, the caseworker had let me know. She said, she has asked that you call her. She knows you have a job and are working. I don't know if they told her I was a teacher, but she knew I had a job. And so I was going to be the one. They were going to share the phone numbers. They would give her my number, but I was the one that was to initiate the call if that was what I wanted. She wanted to make sure that this is what I truly wanted. And so I remember I got the kids in the car and I had all three by now, and they're older. So we got home, and I said, listen, look at mommy. You go in each of your separate rooms so no one can kill each other. Go in your separate rooms and do not come out. Do not come out and do not bother mommy. I have to do something very important. And I got on the phone and I dialed the number. I know I was shaking. And a sweet voice said, hello. And I said, Kathy, because they had only told me her first name. She said, yes. I said, this is Lisa, the baby you gave up for adoption so many years ago. And we both began to cry. It was just the sweetest moment of we just sat in silence, just kind of taking it in, catching our breath, the realization of what God had done in bringing us back together. And then it was really a short conversation. In fact, Spencer made fun of me when I got off the phone. We basically, I said, I have one thing I need to say to you. And then it, I don't know if you want to talk to me anymore. I don't want to disrupt your life and the life you've built. Um, but I just have to say something to you. And she said, okay, go ahead. I said, I need to tell you that you're my hero. You did something so selfless and such an act of love and trust in the Lord. And because of your act, I want to tell you what my life has been like. And I actually wrote a paper about my adoption story, and I wrote about my birth mother being my hero when I was in high school. And I shared that with her, and she said, no. She said, your parents are the heroes in the story because, see, I was a young girl and I was praying all the time that God would put this child. I gave her life, but I wanted her to have a full life. I wanted her to have a mother and a father and a Christian home and go to church and know the Lord. And that's exactly what I prayed for that happened. She said, your parents are heroes. So, see, it was just a beautiful, beautiful full circle of the story that God did. But we got off the phone. We said, yeah, we want to keep talking and maybe meet sometime. And I said, okay, all right. So I got off the phone and Spencer said, so? And I said, well, her name is Kathy. And he said, well, I already knew that. What's her last name? I don't know. Well, I didn't ask her last name. Is that really important? He said, okay, well, where does she live? Greenville, somewhere. I don't know. You didn't get her address? No. Okay. Well, like, what about the rest of the family? I, I don't know. I, I know she has kids. I don't know. And he said, well, good grief, Lisa. You know, what in the world? I said, well, I don't know what to do. There's no book for this. Nobody knows how to do this that I had talked to. And I hadn't found anything on steps to, have a reunification with your birth mom. I said, but she does want to keep talking and we want to meet. And he said, okay, when? I was like, I don't know. I have to call her back. So I called her back. We talked again for a little, and we decided, where do you meet when you're meeting me for the first time I'm going to remember? She's meeting a child that's now an adult. I thought someplace, not at my home. That's not neutral. You need to be neutral, not her home. Okay, if they're Greenville and we're Athens, Cracker Barrel in Commerce. It's perfect. There's rocking chairs on the front porch. It's homey, right? See, y'all are thinking the same thing. So we decided we'd meet at Cracker Barrel, and it was just going to be her husband, Keith, and Spencer would go with me. Then we got off the phone, and we had to wait from February, okay, until March 2nd was the day we were going to meet. It was a Saturday. That was the first Saturday that we didn't have kids at soccer games or something going on with church and activities. So it was May 2nd. So we get in the truck and we're driving and we're getting closer and I'm just nervous, y'all. I couldn't even sleep the night before. I couldn't eat anything. Now the night before, okay, it was just, Spencer's trying to calm me down and it was like, I'm like, we need to go now. He's like, Cracker Barrel's closed. I'm like, okay, okay, okay. He's like, please try to calm down. So we get up that morning, we're in the truck, we're getting close to Commerce, and Spencer, logic man, he says, okay, what does their car look like? I didn't ask what kind of car they have. He's like, oh my goodness. So how are we going to know if they're here? I'm like, oh, well, no, it's okay. And he says, okay, but you did tell her like you're wearing this color of shirt and she told you what color of shirt she's wearing? I said, no, we didn't get into all that. That didn't matter. And he said, Lisa, how are you going to know? And I said, I'm just going to know. And here's a picture of the first time I got out of the truck. She was on the porch. We ran to each other. We knew each other immediately. We embraced. We were both crying. The men were looking at us like back and forth and back and forth. And we even dressed in our black and gray alike without even planning it. So we sat there at Cracker Barrel for a long time, y'all. The waitress, they changed shifts as we just talked back and forth and shared. But then, even better, y'all, God just kept pouring out blessings better than I could have ever imagined. He also let me meet my maternal grandparents, and I think I have a picture of that. Granny and Papa were still alive, and I was able to meet. He was the pastor of the church when Kathy told him that she was pregnant, and he and Granny had pastored that church for 40 something years and were still a part of that church just as members, and I was able to go and be there. I even heard Papa preach, and y'all, it just was beyond my wildest dreams. And when I met Papa and Granny, it was at Kathy's house. We were going to go on their 60th anniversary. She was going to have all the family at the house, and she told us to come, meaning me, Spencer, and my 3 children. And I'm like, well, what are you telling people? And she said, I don't know. We don't have that figured out yet. I was like, okay, this could go really bad. I mean, I'm not thinking it's going to, but it could. We get to South Carolina, and she had told Jessica, Kyle, and Kelsey, okay, siblings. She had told them the night before, and she texted me on my phone, and she said they can't wait to meet their sister. And I thought, okay, God, it's all right. They get it too. They see your heart. They see the story that you wove in all of our lives. So we get there. Granny and Papa are there, but she says, these are our friends from Georgia. I'm like, your friends from Georgia that just show up for the anniversary lunch, whatever. And then Kelsey comes up with the idea. They have a card. Everybody is signing the card to Granny and Papa. Happy anniversary. So she said, just sign the card and we'll figure it out. So I sign at the bottom, happy anniversary. Love, your new granddaughter. Close it. We're getting ready to eat. They gather up. And they say, we're going to say a prayer of grace. They say grace, and then Kathy says, but wait, I want you to open your card from everybody before we eat. Now, Papa, he could be a little curmudgeon-y, and he was like, oh, good grief, we just need to eat. He was hungry. And she said, no, read the card. So he gets the card, and he's like, rah, rah. She's like, read it out loud. And he's like, oh, my goodness, happy anniversary on your 60th. And he's just trying to get, and he throws the card. And she said, wait, read that last one at the bottom again. He said, happy anniversary on your new granddaughter. I don't get it. Oh, good grief. And he gives the card to Granny. And he says, I don't get it. Is somebody having a baby? And we're all standing there. It was Papa, Mom, Granny, and me. And she said, nobody's having a baby. I had a baby almost 40 years ago. And this is her, Lisa. She's back in our life. And the room erupted in tears and squeals of joy and hugs, lots of hugs. And it was just a special celebration, y'all. It was so, 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 so sweet. And I had several years with Granny and Papa that I'm so thankful for. And then another picture, I was able to be a part of some of my siblings, my brothers and sisters growing up. That was at Kelsey's wedding. She actually asked me to direct her wedding. So that was me and Mama Kathy at Kelsey's wedding. I've been there for nieces and nephews' births and them growing up now. And just, again, it's just a beautiful story. Now, I'm not naive. I know that stories don't always have a happy ending, okay? But I want to take you to a verse in 2 Peter 3:18. It says, but grow in the grace and knowledge of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. To him be the glory both now and until the day of eternity, all the way through. Y'all, it's a process. You just have to keep walking in faith. You have to keep trusting his plan, His purpose because it's good. It's for your good, even if you don't see the end on this side of eternity. And that was always my prayer. I knew even if I did not meet them on this side, I had a hope that I would meet them in eternity one day. But I'm so thankful He chose to do it on earth. Now, as I wrap up, I want to encourage you with a couple of things. Paul's going to come up and start praying, and we're going to open the altar up for a time of prayer. Angie and I will be down here if you just want to come up individually and spend some time in prayer yourself. If you want to be prayed over, that's fine. I would also encourage you, we left the connect cards on the table. Maybe you've already filled them out with your name and information, but we also want you to put if you've made a decision, ladies. Remember, trusting the Lord is the most important decision you'll make. But maybe there's next steps that you're ready to take in your journey, in the story that God's weaving. Maybe you want to talk about becoming a part of the church. Maybe you want to talk about baptism or joining a Bible study or something like that. But as I wrap up, I want you to know your story is important. Your story, not just mine. See, He gives us all unique and different stories for His glory. We can't all be the same, but we can all share our story. So here's 3 things during this time. I want you to take time, reflect back on your story. Reflect back on times that you had faith. You didn't give in to fear. You chose faith. I want you to thank God. Just thank Him. Audibly say that, or in your heart, tell Him thank you for your story. He's the author and finisher of it. So thank the Lord for the story that He's given you. No, it may not be what you thought it was going to be, maybe even what you hoped in some places, but it's your story. And remember, your story is so that not only you would have an epiphany, but that others around you can come to a deeper understanding of God's character, of who He is, His grace, His mercy, His faithfulness, His tender compassion, His loving kindness, His truth. There's a verse in Philemon 6. It's just one book, but Philemon 6. And it's the last thing. So as you reflect and you thank God, I also want you to think about, when can you tell your story? Who can you share your story with? Because see, Philemon says, I pray that you would be active in sharing so that you would have a full understanding of every gift that you have in Christ Jesus. Ladies, the more we share our story, the more we fall deeper in love with our Creator, with the Lord of Lords and the King of Kings, who made us to come into relationship with Him. So think about, how can you share your story? Can you journal it? I know if you pray and ask God, He'll cross a path with someone that maybe needs to hear a piece of your story or all of your story. But that's my encouragement to you, that you don't leave today without recognizing your story is a testimony of God's character. So share it.